Hello, and thank you for the privilege of me being able to serve as your senior pastor here at Farmington Lutheran Church. I want to take a couple of minutes at this time of the annual meeting to look back on this past year and to go ahead and look forward as well. First off, thank you. I've been thinking of that word hesed, a word from the Hebrew language that means steadfast love. Actually, it means more than that. It encompasses God's generosity and faithfulness and kindness and gentleness. Thank you for the ways that God's hesed has shined through you this past year. It's been a crazy year, that's for sure. Lots of unknowns and uncertainties, and in that, it's as important now as ever, I think, to be the church. Other things change, but our mission stays the same. And I say that not like as in stuck in our ways. It's a mission that's had flexibility. It's been carried out in new ways. But that mission of people knowing God's amazing love for them, for it to shape our lives as followers of Jesus, and then to be sent out day after day, knowing that God is at work in this world, and you and I get to join in so that people can know God's amazing love and grace and justice and mercy. So thank you for your partnership in this ministry we share. Thank you also for this last year for your patience and for your creativity during what's been a difficult time for many. I give thanks to look at our ministries of worship, of education, of service, of caregiving, the flexibility, phone call ministries, service ministries that responded to the need at the moment, whether it's need to support food ministries here in our community or to collect PPE or a blood drive. I appreciate your flexibility with worship, whether it was drive-through worship or outdoor worship or indoor worship or drive-in, you name it. The flexibility to be able to share, to do faith formation, whether it was out on the lawn, whether it was indoors, and all the folks behind the scenes doing things like providing Wi-Fi and live streaming, doing things virtually, hybrid and in person. Thank you. How is that possible? It's because we got wonderful people who the light of Christ shines through. At the end of this, or maybe you looked at it before, we've got a document highlighting some folks who've been at work behind the scenes. And those are some wonderful folks, and I'm sure they've done much more than what's printed on that page. And there's so many more, including yourself and others hearing this video. Thank you for the ways that the light of Christ has shown through you and continues to. At the end of this pandemic, sometimes folks talk about things going back to normal. And I think the reality is there's a number of things that we've been thrust into, doing things more, offering virtual. A lot of those things won't be going away. As a people who strive to be an everyday church, connecting people to God and each other, for many, that will be the way. That will be their preferred means of connecting, is virtually. And so we'll continue to discern that. But I think the reality is there's no going back completely. There is tools and how they will utilize and new things coming. And let's together encourage each other to have that flexibility, to keep discerning, to use the best tools that we can to further God's mission in this time and place. I want to say also, maybe I shared this before, but with all the unknowns that we've had in this past year, thanks for your generosity, that part of God's hesed. Back in March, I remember sitting and kind of wondering, how is this all going to go? And you've shined through in great and glorious ways. And I look at for next year, as you've responded with statements of intent and changes to automated giving or beginning to do automated giving, and all those things, we're looking at an increase in offerings for this next year that will allow us to do some really important and needed things. As much as I celebrate all the great things we've done, we all know the reality is there's things we want to be stronger in. I look at in the ministry that I get to be a part of, I wish we were doing more Bible studies and connecting some fellowship things. I wish we were stronger in our caregiving. I want all folks to feel accompanied. And with that, we're going to continue to try to build systems that not only serve more people, but engage more people in carrying out each of these ministries. One important tool that we're able to do this year because of your generosity is to call an associate pastor. And that associate pastor we have in our budget that they would begin in September. We're probably, this is kind of a rough timeline, beginning to do interviews in the month of May. But September at the earliest is when we'll be able to have a second pastor. Pastors are not everything. You know that as you look at me, but that's going to be one of our tools for growing stronger in a congregation and our ministries of learning, of service, and of congregational care as well. I don't want to go too long-winded, so I want to say thanks for all the amazing work that you have done. I give thanks for a great, amazing staff and their willing day after day to answer the bell and think outside the box. I give thanks for such a supportive church council, working with great collaboration, all these things and more. There's more than what I can say here. As we continue on this next year, we also know that we want to grow stronger in our mental health ministries. And that is going to likely start with an assessment to understand our awareness and our needs as a congregation. And we'll look at some tangible steps of things we can do to be stronger, to support each other through the mental health challenges of life. We also, as I mentioned before, about digital ministries not going away. We want to continue to strengthen those and keep looking at how we should use those to best serve people, to best serve this mission that we share. And so as I close this message today, thank you for the privilege of being able to serve as your senior pastor. Thank you for all that you've done in this past year. God's blessings to you in it all as we look back and as we look ahead to being the church together this year. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bob Brownawell, and I'm here to give my fourth and final annual Treasurer's Report. For your reference, my written Treasurer's Report and the annual budget can be found in the 2020 annual report, either in print or in the online version. Many things have been said about 2020, most of them unfavorable, but my choice to describe last year's FLC financial story would be the word unusual. If you are able to see the slide I prepared showing the overall 2020 budget results, you may see what I'm getting at. For example, when compared to what total receipts were budgeted to be in 2020, which was $955,000, our actual receipts came in at just under $824,000, or 13.7% below budget. On the other hand, if we looked at just general offerings, which make up about 90% of overall receipts, and compare it to 2019 total offerings, the negative difference is just under 2%. I think this is really quite remarkable, considering that due to the pandemic, the church building has been mostly closed since March. And when we look at 2020 expenses, the difference between budget and actuals becomes even greater. Actual expenses this past year came in at only $789,600. This is a full 16% below budget. That's a huge difference, but one that is explained by the fact that several staff positions went unfilled for most of the year and very little on-site programming in our youth and children's ministries was able to take place. Now, if we go on to the next slide, you will see that our church actually had a net positive balance of $34,300 in 2020, which is indeed good news. The first measure of a church's financial health is the general fund balance. And as I mentioned in my written report, having a general fund balance greater than 2 months of expenditures is generally considered a safe amount. That number is currently $150,000. As you will see on the slide, the current general fund balance as of December 31st is slightly over $222,000, which again is very good news. For the record, however, I should note that this amount includes $94,600 granted to us by the U.S. government under the Paycheck Protection Program contained in the CARES Act passed by Congress last March. These extra dollars should go a long way in helping our church continue to carry out its important ministries during these difficult times. One more financial area I'd like to comment on is the status of what we refer to as our dedicated funds. Like the general fund, these dedicated ones are used to advance the mission and ministries of our church. But unlike the general fund, these funds are reserved for specific purposes such as memorials, and mortgage principal reduction, and many other good worthy causes. On the slide, please note that the total cash balance for all the various dedicated funds stands at $107,000. This is essentially the same amount as last year. For additional information about the various 2020 transactions in these funds, you'll find a page in the annual report titled Dedicated Accounts Transactions. In the slight possibility, some of you watching this virtual report will have a question or two about something you've seen or heard regarding last year's financial numbers. Please feel free to email them to finance@farmingtonlutheran.com or submit them during the actual meeting to be held on January 31st as both a drive-in and online event. Moving on to the second part of my report, and also the next slide, I would like you to note the results of our annual internal audit of FLC financial practices that was conducted in early January. In short, the findings indicate that our financial management is sound. And on behalf of the Finance Committee, I want to thank Lynn Hammond for stepping up to lead this year's audit. After leading the audit for many years, Dennis Watson has stepped aside so that he would be able to serve as your treasurer for at least the next 2 years. And for this, I am very grateful. The focus of the last part of my treasurer's report will be to present the 2021 annual budget for approval by the congregation. As I previously mentioned, this document can be found in the published annual report and shows in detail what I've condensed into 2 main bullet points that I will talk about on the next slide. The 2021 budget was primarily built on the outcomes of 2 important budget parameters. The first parameter would be to use actual 2020 offerings as our starting point, because that is the reality at hand. And the second would be how the annual fall stewardship appeal turned out in relation to the ministry initiatives it set as our goals. While the appeal just completed contains several important initiatives, there are 2 that will have a substantial impact on sustaining current ministries and operations by covering the steadily increasing costs due to inflation and cost of living adjustments. This works out to be approximately $25,000 annually. The other initiative with significant financial impact is actually one that encompasses several of the others articulated in the appeal documents. This would be the hiring of a new associate pastor in 2021 with a hoped-for start date of September 1st. Thankfully, the results of the fall appeal, as measured by the 187 return statements of intent, indicate that the necessary increase in receipts to pay for these initiatives is well within reach. The resulting 2021 projection for total receipts has been established at $887,500. As you will note on the slide, this represents a $63,600 increase over last year's actual receipt. But at the same time, it also is $67,500 less than the 2020 budget number. Now, in order to balance the 2021 budget, total expenses were calculated by considering 3 main factors. 1, what the 2020 actual costs were in the many various expense accounts. 2, the need to incorporate additional costs projected in the appeal. And 3, projecting what impact of the ongoing pandemic is likely to have on FLC's many ministries, including children, youth, and music and worship. It is our hope and expectation that by September, some degree of normalcy will have returned such that the usual fall programming can resume along with regular indoor services. As is the case with projected receipts, the final number for expenses represents a sizable increase over 2020 actual spending. But it also similarly shows up as a large decrease when it comes to being compared with the 2020 budget projection of $955,000. I would encourage you, as you may be interested, to look at the details of the 2021 budget presented in the annual report to see how the budget works as a necessary companion for supporting the good work of all the ministries at Farmington Lutheran. Also, again, feel free to submit any questions you may have via email to finance@farmingtonlutheran.com or in real time on January 31st at the drive-in annual meeting. In closing this report, I would like to circle back to the fact that this is also the closing of my 4-year tenure as treasurer. For me, this time as treasurer has been a very rewarding experience and has given me the opportunity to work with many great people on councils, staff, and finance teams. It has also allowed me to be able to just help out, as my gifts allowed, with the responsibility of keeping FLC on a good path financially. 2020 was indeed an unusual year in the life and times of Farmington Lutheran. But in the midst of it all, I came across a poem that struck a chord with me. Actually, it is a very nice song, but as being musical is not one of my gifts, I would like to share it as a poem. Christ has walked this path, the path that we are on. Angels walk with us, the path that we are on. Father, Son, and Spirit, keep us in your hands and remind us that the path that we are on, Christ has walked. I'm so thankful to be a part of this wonderful church and fellowship with so many good and generous people. This relationship helps me to wake up every morning in the knowledge and comfort that I do not walk this path alone. Thank you.